Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac, and welcome to an unusual Friday Reads, where I'm just going to think outside the box and turn everything upside down and give you something a little different. Mostly because I'm tired. Today was a day that I hope to finish 4 more books, and I barely read 20 pages. I'm not working too hard. I don't think I have an addiction to BookTube and bookish stuff. Maybe I do. We're not going to problematize that. But I do have a little bit of an insomnia thing, and, I take a lot of short naps through the day to keep myself going. And today, those short naps just turned into really long naps, and I slept half the day away and didn't get very much reading done. And I don't think I'm going to have any books finished. I'm going to still try to finish 1 or 2 and tell you about those tomorrow. But this is Thursday night, and what I'm going to start my Friday Reads with on Thursday night is something a little different. But let's start with the week in review. I've been busy. Here is a little recap. We are going to talk about I heard it referred to when I was doing research for this chat. The Globe and Mail called it Canada's Lady Chatterley's Lover. Marion Engel's Bear, 1976.
If you were put in the hot seat here, as you are, and said, what is your 1 or 2 sentence description of what is the man from Glengarry, what would you say?
The man from Glengarry is a man from Glengarry whose life journey kind of embodies that settler mentality of exploring and taking over the land and causing capitalism and Christianity to break out from coast to coast.
Randolph is a 50-year-old closet queen. He's like an academic monkey. Is that how you pronounce it? Never really connected to the university, but family connection to the board of supervisors or whatever it's called. Board of directors, what do they call it? The board of trustees for the university. And he collects ephemera, and he's never married. And he has a series of short-lived relationships, we're not sure of what kind, with young male students at the university, takes them under his wing and tries to mentor them, and I don't know what else he tries to do because it's a very subtle novel, but he sets his sights on Bertram.
The characters are so nuanced, I guess, that there's something very human and gentle and kind about it all.
Would you say that the stories are sentimental?
No, I don't.
See, that's the thing. If it's not sentimental, I think I would like it.
Yeah, I mean, feel good. Anything that's feel good, I immediately, I hate feeling manipulated in that sort of way.
Right.
And I don't think that's what this is. I think it's just moments of happiness and pleasure.
And now I think, because I may not have much to say about current reads and books finished and whatnot this particular week, I'm going to finally tell you why I quit Scribd in a huff and will never, ever go back. Fuck Scribd. It was when I was getting really involved, when was it? In the spring? Starting out with Invisible Cities and Scribd, I was a very happy, for the most part, very contented member for 5 years, 6 years. But the more I used it, the more they set quotas that they would not explain to me so that I could avoid whatever triggered the restrictions. Scott of Gunpowder Fiction and Plot has done a really interesting video about this, and he focused his analysis on audiobooks only and showed, kind of with some statistical rigor, how many of his books on his saved list would become unavailable to him temporarily once he listened to a new audiobook. That is a good introduction to this weird algorithm that Scribd has. That the more you use their service, the less they let you have access to on any given month or any given 10-day period or whatever it is. But they don't explain it. They refuse to tell you in their manual, their instructions, or answering any emails I've sent them, what it is, what you should avoid doing, because after many years of using it very lightly and really valuing it, I mean, it's $10 a month, and, you know, there's 500,000 books and 50,000 audiobooks. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly an immense resource for the price. You get what it's worth the money, except that Scott only has told part of the story, because what happened to me was the more that I would like preview a book, look at a page 112, add a book to my saved list, anything, the more I just dipped into a book, Scribd would not only not let me have access to books that I had saved until the first of the subsequent month, but they started pulling books that I was currently reading. So it happened in the space of 5 days, where about 4 or 5 books that I started were then withdrawn from. Some of them disappeared from Scribd entirely, and that I think that does happen rarely, that publishers can just pull the book off Scribd at a moment's notice, and there's nothing that you or Scribd can do about it. But books that I had started and had some kind of a timeline, whether it was a buddy read or it was that particular country's, that book was from a country that I wanted to read this particular month for Invisible Cities, and they just kept disappearing one after the other, and I just was enraged. So I sent a really angry letter, help thing request to Scribd, and then within an hour I said, you know what? I don't effing care. You don't have to reply. I quit. I will never come back. And I will not come back. It's cheap. I'm not poor. I spent $70 buying a lot of the books and audiobooks that I had been listening to and had pulled away from me on Scribd. And I bought them through Apple Books, through Kindle and whatever, paper copies, whatever. And that's my income allows me to, you know, carry on as if Scribd doesn't exist, because it's certainly dead to me. Now, if you're a low-volume user, you won't encounter probably what I did as a high-powered, you know, book maniac. But I hate Scribd, and I have nothing good to say about Scribd, and you will not hear me. I will never go back. So that's what happened with me and Scribd. All right, so let's move on to happier news. Tomorrow, I'm going to do a more current update, books I've started, books I've finished, books I've bailed on. But for tonight, I'm going to give you very brief updates on all of the books that you haven't heard me talk about for weeks, if not months. My current reads is currently at about 27, something like that. So I'm going to very briefly give you a wine-infused update on each and every one. Let's start with some that are on ebook before I forget, so I don't forget about them. High Lonesome, selected short stories by Joyce Carol Oates. I started reading it, I think, last year. I'm only 30% of the way in, and I haven't read one of the stories in a couple months. So it's a short story collection. I don't have to pick it up on a regular basis to be enjoying it. I wasn't really enjoying it, but I think the first stories were really new stories as of 2006 when the collection came out, and I didn't like very many of them, but I think I'm expecting I'm going to enjoy some of the earlier stories, and soon it's going to go back to Joyce Carol Oates stories from the 60s, 70s, and so on. I also haven't dipped into James Lees Milne's diary, Volume 1, 1942 to 1954. He was the gay diarist who was also an employee of the British Trust and did a lot about preserving landed estates and old estate noblemen's houses and stuff. I read a book of excerpts last year, which I loved, and so I'm reading an abridged version of the entire diaries. Love it. It's the kind of thing I can pick up and put down and, you know, pick it up 2 months later, 3 months later, and it's been at least 3 months since I've looked at it. I'm only 9% of the way into that. Clarissa, the 1758 novel by Samuel Richardson. I did the first 1.5 parts of the audiobook, and that was on Scribd, and so that is now not available to me. And to buy, I was about, I don't know, remember, 40% through Volume 2 of the audiobook. Each of the 3 parts of the audiobook is 34 hours, and I was about maybe halfway through Volume 2. To buy Volume 2 anywhere that I can buy it, it's $70. So it's out of my price range. So I started just reading. I bought a copy on Kindle and have been reading it, but I haven't picked it up in at least 3 months. So the story is still alive in my brain, I can remember exactly where it left off. And I am now planning to take out a year's subscription to the Naxos, how do you pronounce it? Naxos audiobook subscription. 1 year is $130, and they have all the classics, brilliantly narrated, including the exact audiobook that I had been listening to. It's worth $130 a year for me just to be able to finish Clarissa in that wonderful audio book. And they have all kinds of other stuff that I will be listening to. I haven't got my subscription yet, but that will be happening any day, and then I will start listening to it more regularly again. All right, so those are the ones that are on ebook, and that now I'm randomly, I've got all the paper copies, and I'm now going to give far briefer updates on all the books that you haven't heard me talk about. The Yield, I'm rereading it, really enjoying it, haven't looked at it in a month. Same story with Berlin Alexanderplatz by Alfred Döblin. I'm sorry, I've already forgotten. I'll never remember how to pronounce his name. Translated by Michael Hoffman. Really enjoying it. Haven't picked it up in 5 weeks. It's not the kind of book you can put down for 5 weeks. I may end up putting it on hold, but I haven't given up on it yet. The Chinese novel, published I think in the 1940s, Rickshaw Boy by Lao She, translated by Howard Goldblatt. It's excellent. Haven't picked it up for a couple of weeks. Maybe we'll finish it. Maybe it's one of the next ones I'll finish, like maybe next week or the week after, but it's really excellent. Book are long listed, The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohamed. Only dip into it a couple times a week. It's good. That's all I have to say about it so far, but it's good. It's quite good. For Invisible Cities and Women in Translation Month, both which the months have long passed, I'll Go On by Hwang Jungeun, translated from the Korean by Emily Ye Wan. I'm not so sure about it. I have read 50 pages, haven't dipped into it for a week or 10 days, but it was holding my interest. Buddy Read with Ollie Bliss. This anthology of gay male short stories, Speak My Language, edited by Torsten Holzer, is one of the worst anthologies of any kind of short fiction that I've ever read. I've bailed on 40% of the stories and hated 40% more, and 20% of them, if I've done the math right, have been worth reading. So moving through it fairly quickly because of all the bails, and Ollie, I think, agrees with me. It's a pretty shitty collection of gay male fiction. One of the most important books I will read this year, or any year, A National Crime by John Malloy. This is a work of scholarly history about the black mark on Canada, the residential schools, our instrument of colonial genocide, and it's all here. I only read 10 pages a week, and that's about all that my heart can take in. It's brilliant and important, and my goal is to finish it and have a review up for Indigathon, if Indigathon is still happening in November, which means I've got my reading cut out for me. That may not happen that quickly, but this is incredible, and just I come from a very evil country. This is an amazing collection of Irish short stories by Lucy Caldwell, a buddy read with Joe Smith. Joe and I just read and loved the story Poison, and it's not only the best story in the collection so far, it is one of the best short stories I've read this year. It's a strong contender for my pick for short story of the year. This is fantastic. Booker nominee, Mary Lawson's A Town Called Solace. I have only read about 5 pages, maybe read 10 pages or 20 pages since I talked about it last Friday. No change. Nupaming by Leanne Batasamasake Simpson. The Cure for White Ladies. This is probably going to be a read of the year. I need to be reading it a little oftener because it's just stunning. I am doing this as an ebook, but here's the paper copy, which the print is too small for my old aging eyes. In the Castle of My Skin by George Lamming, which is a Barbadian novel that I originally started for Invisible Cities, and it's excellent. It's also one of the ones, this bookmark is not accurate, but I'm not very far into it, 25% maybe. Really enjoying it. It's one of the ones I'm hoping to finish fairly soon. The Book of Unknown Americans by Cristina Hernandez. Haven't read very much of it since I told you about it a week or two ago, but it's excellent. This is kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Roz, are you having a conniption? So for Women in Translation, the Tamil novel from India, Women Dreaming by Salma, translated from the Tamil by Meena Kandasamy. It's really good. It's excellent. It's also chunky. I hope to finish it by Christmas. And finally, this is a buddy read that there's only a couple of weeks left and Heidi and I will be finished. Also a top read of the year, Indigenous Rights Guide to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Issues in Canada by Chelsea Vowell. It's as good as, and a perfect companion volume to, Thomas King's, is it called The Accidental Indian? I think it's The Accidental Indian? No. Whatever his nonfiction work on Indigenous life in North America is. This is a fabulous companion volume. It is searing and really reader-friendly, very accessible guide to how white people suck in Canada. Big time! So, that is what's in progress that you don't hear me checking in about very much. Stay tuned tomorrow for, given how long I've nattered on, whatever I have to tell you tomorrow is going to, I'm going to try to keep it brief. See you tomorrow. All right, it's Friday. I haven't finished any books, but I am super organized and still have a lot to tell you that I'm going to try to tell you in Reader's Digest condensed fashion. So you may have noticed, if you were double-checking against my Goodreads, there were 5 other books that I was currently reading that I didn't talk about yesterday. 2 because I forgot. One is The Way of All Flesh, the 1903 novel by Samuel Butler that I'm doing on audio, and it's going well. I put it on every time I leave the house. I don't leave the house very often or for very long, but I'm still making steady progress through the audiobook. I'm really not caring so much about the story with that one, but the sensibility of the narrator is quite delightful and rather gay. And the buddy read with Britta, The Pain Tree, the collection of short stories by the Jamaican-Canadian writer Olive Sr. in 1 story a week. So those are the only other 2, other than the 3 that I hope to finish. So I'm going to talk maybe a little bit longer about these. I'd hoped to finish these 3 for today, and I didn't finish any of them, but I plan to finish them by next week. Carter Sickles, The Prettiest Star. It's ripping my heart out. I would be shocked if it's anything other than a 5-star read when I finish it in the next few days. A Touch of Jen, which I didn't make as much progress as I had hoped. You know what? I watched a Zoom thing with her on it, and she spoiled the ending, or talked about how halfway through, it's probably on the inside flap, but I won't spoil it in case it's not on the inside flap. You know me, I don't read the synopsis, but there's a really bizarre turn in the story, and ever since I heard about that turn, I've been turned off of it, even though what I'm reading now I'm still really enjoying, but I'm preparing to bail if it's as stupid as it sounds. But if it works for me, that would be a breakthrough. But it takes a genre fictional weird turn, so I really have lowered my expectations and still hope to either have finished it or bailed on it by next Friday. And this is for the discussion, the Zoom discussion for Women in Translation Month with Cecilia, The Bridge of Beyond by Simone Schwartz-Bart, translated from the French by Barbara Bray. We have put our discussion off for a week, so I don't have to finish it, and I didn't want to rush it. I will save my comments until you see the video, so I expect to finish it in the coming days. Okay, so that is a quick summary of all of my current reads, and I am not time-stamping all of those books. I'm listing them all in the show notes, but I'm not time-stamping them. So you're either going to have to fast-forward through it if you don't want to watch all those. But from now on, I will time-stamp everything, as I have been doing for months, and a little bit of a personal pause before I move on to the more substantive part of my Friday reads. I just finished booking Kenji's and my flights to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada for Christmas. It's gonna happen. Kenji's got both of his vaccination appointments scheduled for this month and will be fully vaccinated, and we're going home for Christmas. How fabulous. And before I forget, I will say this now. My second shot is Thursday, September 9th. So if I am blotto like I was last time, I may not do a Friday reads, I may do it on Saturday, or I may just simply skip a week. So, we'll just play that by ear. All right, I am almost 100% shameless, but yet I still feel a little bit vulnerable showing you all the books that I haven't picked up for weeks, if not months. So that was actually a really good wake up and smell the coffee exercise from yours truly, and I have a plan. Do you want to hear the plan? I'm going to tell you the plan. I came up with it today, and I thought, well, don't tell them, because then, if it doesn't work, you're going to look even stupider next week. I'm willing to risk it. So, there are, all the books I've told you about, there are 13 books that I rarely pick up any oftener than once a month, or, not often enough. So, I have decided, and I'm not going to list them, but I know which 13 they are, and so this is my plan. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to read 10 pages from each of those 13 books every Saturday, and then another 10 pages from each of those books every Sunday. Usually it's Sunday night, Monday, where I start to think, okay, which ones could I possibly finish by Thursday night, so I'll have something finished to talk about for my Friday reads, and that will continue. But I will have read 20 pages each of all of these books that I've been neglecting, so that they will be more in the mix, and then my weekday reading will be buddy reads, and other books that I'm already giving a lot of regular attention to, but that the books that are falling off, what's the metaphor? Falling through the cracks will no longer be falling through the cracks, and they'll be all more in the running for books that I might pick up and say, let's finish this sucker for this by Thursday night. So that feels really doable, and if it doesn't work, at least I tried something. Hey, so I'm excited. I do plan to finish the 3 books that I've already shown you, but I will be getting at least 20 pages of each of the others read per week. That feels fabulous. Okay, I have one bail to tell you about. I didn't like this Razorblade Tears. It's a thriller. It's a mystery. It's genre fiction. There's absolutely nothing literary about it. I was moved by the African American and the white dad of the 2 gay lovers that were murdered, that their grief kind of brought them together, but as soon as it got into them trying to solve the murders, I hate crime fiction. I hate it. I will never try it again. Don't let me try it again. Now, it's not quite true that I didn't finish anything, but these don't count towards any thing, because these were my secret reads, and I've already shown you the previews for the videos. So the one video is on the Man from Glengarry by Ralph Connor. If you watch the video, you'll see that I read the book with Una and Crypto of Codex Cantina, so you don't have to. It's pretty awful. I gave it 3 stars because it has historical value and it held my interest, but it's a terrible novel, full of religious crap. Much more successfully, my other secret project, Marion Engel's 1976 novel Bear. It's the best Canadian novel I think I've ever read. I have no criticisms about it. It's wonderful. And it's about a bear sex, but don't let that stop you. It stopped me for 55 years, and I finally got to it, and it is my favorite work of Canadian fiction. I'm pretty sure it is. It's in the top 2 anyway. So, of what I've started, and I'm going to try to continue to be very brief here, as I started 5 books. This collection of short stories, Blue in Chicago by Bette Howland. I wasn't that taken with the first really short story, but I am about 2/3 of the way through the second story, which is the title story, and it is fantastic. That's all I really have to say. I'm going to read it probably slowly, but it may be one of those ones that I only read for 10 pages on Saturday and 10 pages on Sunday eventually, but right now I'm reading it a little bit more often than that, and it's good. It's shapely literary short stories. And I'm not as far in as I should be on A Passage North by Anuk Arudpragasam. This is my buddy read with Kim of Middle of the Book March. We're going to check in next Wednesday, so I got quite a bit of reading to do, but it is fantastic. He's even better than he was in his debut, which is how it should be. I'm just swept up by it. That's enough said. And I'm going to talk a little bit longer about this. This is the Palestinian novel, Gate to the Sun by Elias Khoury, translated from the Arabic by the improbably named Humphrey Davies. I'm only 20 pages into it, but boy, have I been absorbed in those 20 pages. So I'll show you what I'm doing. I'll put something up. I decided by about page 3 that I had already been introduced to a whole bunch of characters, and that this was going to be a magnum opus full of characters and storylines. And if I'm going to be reading this alongside a dozen other books, which is, you know, right now 26 other books, I'm going to need to keep really detailed notes so that I can just pick up and, you know, making a list of all the characters, and not only just a list of who they are, but so far I have started out, here's a chart, listing all the stuff about them that's happening, so that I'm going to kind of be telling the story through my note. I'm going to keep track in a really deep way of the story as I read. That means it might take me 5 years to read, but it seems to be working as I'm really enjoying it. So far I'm just tracking the characters. I may eventually start tracking the locations. So it's set in a Palestinian refugee camp, which is also the title in Arabic of the novel. So far I've been introduced to, I don't know too much about the first person narrator, but he is the son of Yunus, and he is not a doctor, but he works in a hospital. His father is comatose, and it's his adopted father, but his father is comatose in the hospital, and he's talking to him even though his father's lying there unresponsive. And all of this story, this really intricately layered story, is coming out in the first 20 pages. I've got probably 2 pages of notes. The father's name is Yunus. The mother, again, adopted mother, is Nahila, and she was killed in a massacre at a different camp in 1985. And there's all kinds of intense relationships and weird emotional complexities to all of this backstory. And his real parents, Khalil is the narrator. His real parents, they were both dead by the time he's narrating the story. His mother disappeared in 1970. His father was dead by the time he was a child. His adoptive father found our narrator, Khalil, alone in the boys' camp, and kind of just took him and raised him. I think that's enough, but these notes, again, it's slowing me right down. I don't want to figure out how long it's going to take me to read it if I only read 2 or 4 pages a day and making these copious notes. But however long it takes, I hope I continue with it, because, whew, I am immersed in the story. I am, I think, a story and a half into this collection of Kenyan stories for the Kenyan Readathon, The Other Woman by Grace Ogot. I am not particularly blown away by the literary quality of these stories so far, but they are holding my interest. They reflect the realities of post-colonial Kenyan women and their relationships and violent society, and adjusting to all the changes coming in post-colonial Kenya. I'm enjoying it on that level, and I'm not hating the writing or whatever, but it's not wowing me in the literary prose department, but it is holding my interest. The one that has knocked my socks off on all possible levels is this Cameroonian novel in translation, Léonora Miano's Season of the Shadow, translated from the French by Gila Walker. And this is a story set in sub-Saharan Africa. It's not necessarily what is now Cameroon, although maybe it is. During the early pre-colonial civilization, during those early days of the slave trade. And so the opening premise is that a whole bunch of, that the slave, the slave, what do you call them? The slave handlers? The people that captured the slaves, what's the word for them? The slave catchers? I don't know what that word would be. They have raided this very peaceful tribal community in the middle of the night, set fire to all the things, and kidnapped 12 or 20 of the men. And so it's set in the aftermath of that, and what happens to this very traditional communal people with all of their beliefs, customs, and superstitions about what's going on, what happened to the men. They don't realize that they've been taken by slave catchers. And so it causes all this stuff. The mothers of the men who've been taken, they feel like there's some kind of bad luck attached to them, some taint, so they are pushed off outside the village in their own hut, and there is a actual shadow, a dark cloud, literally hanging right over the hut where these 12 women are they're not imprisoned, but they're separated from the rest until the chief and so on can figure out what's happened and what message from the gods. And it is told in such a matter-of-fact, fascinating way that I am just absolutely riveted. So I'm not going to need any extra help to keep up with this one. I need to start this because Adam is waiting on me. So this is volume 4 of the Alexandria Quartet, Clea. I will be starting it in the coming week and have promised Adam that I will read the first half by September 15th. So that will be in progress. And that is it. I hope to see you next week at this time, but maybe not. We'll just see how my vaccination goes. But one way or the other, see you later.